Yeah. Hi. Uh,
Okay.
Um,
Uh,
what shall I do the quick intro and then hand it over to you, Barbara?
If you'd like, that's fine.
Yeah. I think almost everybody on the call today has been here before, but welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us again today. Barbara and I are two women with extensive experience, one way and another, of addiction, and we came together to write our book on the subject: addiction, one cause, one solution. And then we thank you, and then we set up this Facebook book group, Recovery from the Inside Out, with a view to kind of working through the book and making it a resource that's available to anybody who wants to join in either live or watch the recordings afterwards. We record the first part, which is Barbara and I um, uh, giving our, sharing our thoughts on a different chapter each week, and then we switch the recording off so that everyone can join in confidence, anonymously, and that bit's just open to the people who are actually live on the call. So here we are, and tonight's chapter is the system that drives behaviors, and Barbara is going to say something about that. So over to you, Barbara.
Okay. Uh, well, for for most of you, you know that what my background is as a psychotherapist, and so the perspective that I sort of bring to this is seeing the simplicity of that's contained in this understanding, in the inside out understanding, and it really simplifies for us how um, our human experience is created. And there have been tomes and tomes and tomes that have been written on psychology over the last 150 years or so. And it can get pretty complicated and pretty convoluted. And I've trained in many of those different ways of thinking about things. But when you really come to see how what we now see about how the mind works and how our psychology actually is formed, it's pretty simple. So Christian, I think a little while ago, posted the diagram that we have in the book in this chapter about how it works. And most people miss it because it's so simple that a lot of people feel insulted by the simplicity of it, or just feel that it couldn't possibly be true. So I guess what we really wanted to talk about in this chapter, and what we wanted to talk about today, is that for anyone dealing with an addiction themselves or dealing with an addict in their life, where most of our attention goes to on a regular basis, and certainly this is the case in treatment that, and the work that we did with addicts. And I certainly understand why it was. And that is on the content of people's behavior. Most people in an active addiction, um, you know, their behaviors can be pretty dramatically problematic. And so, but when we put our, but particularly after people get sober, when we keep the focus on that and on all the things that need to happen, we're not really getting to the root of the matter. And this understanding really gets to the heart of the matter, what it is that causes that the system that drives behaviors. And so I just wanted to read one paragraph out of here that I think is sort of sums it up. So modifying or working on to contain behavior alone is a setup to fail, as anyone who has ever tried to white knuckle recovery will tell you. Any addict who has been incarcerated or in long term treatment for a period of time and goes back to using upon their release can see that external controls don't create lasting change. As long as someone believes that their drug of choice offers them the feeling state they seek, sorry, I just lost my place, every moment resisting it is exhausting. In order to find true transformation of habitual reactive behaviors, the addict needs to wake up to the thinking and belief system that is obscuring the potential within. So again, so simple, but we just didn't know. You know, when you're fixated on the content of behaviors, or even on the content of feelings or the content of thought, you're really not looking at the deeper potential within, the deeper understanding of how it all works. And that understanding is what ultimately sets us free through the gift of insight and the other things that we've talked about in this book, where we can wake up and we can see, oh my gosh, that is what I've been doing. And what was I thinking? How many times have you heard that, right? Yourself. I heard myself say it recently. During the pandemic, I kind of let go of the reins on my food. And my mind is so convincing. I can convince myself of just about anything when it comes to overeating. So, you know, now I look at it and I think, well, what was I thinking? You know, well, the bottom line is I wasn't thinking. I was convincing myself that I could eat what I wanted to eat and that I wasn't going to gain weight. So again, when you get to the heart of that, you don't have to really worry about, you know, I need to do this, I need to shut that down, I need to keep a rein on this, because all of a sudden it becomes a very, very different conversation. So I'm going to leave it there. And Christian, if you want to pick it up.
Sure. Thanks, Barbara. Thank you. Yeah. It's funny because Barbara and I check in advance of these calls just to have a, a little bit about, who's going to lead off and that kind of thing. And in fact, when we spoke earlier today, I had also identified it as a sentence, but it's actually bang in the middle of the bit that that you read, and I didn't have the book in front of me at that point. But yes, there is something that that's lovely about the simplicity of this approach, and that completely turns around the starting point, as I see it, because I spent so much of my life trying to kind of interfere at the the consequences and behavior end of that progression from thought to feeling to behavior to consequences. So I'm really trying to change my life by working at the area with the least leverage, with the least potential to change. And I had no idea that my problems stemmed from somewhere much further upstream, if you like, that the root cause that Barbara referred to was, and it was very simple, but it was just it was, I was looking at it, I was like the wrong, through a telescope, the wrong way round. And it seems to me that when we're talking about addiction, there's always a fundamental misunderstanding, a thought error. And for me, it was in terms of alcohol, which was my, I suppose, most urgent and pressing addiction, the one that was the most dangerous to me, if you like. Until I had a moment of clarity, a huge insight that changed everything, I fundamentally believed, I thought that nothing could provide the same degree of, relief, comfort, connection, peace of mind. Even I mean, I didn't think these things out loud, but it's, if you had asked me, nothing could provide the remedy that alcohol provided in my mistaken thinking. And until I saw through that, I was doomed to either give into it, give into the desire for it, or indulge in the kind of exhausting, overwhelming fight against it that Barbara read out in that passage. And because by definition, while I was holding on to that false belief, that misunderstanding, I could only, not drinking was not a satisfactory state of affairs. It was a deprivation. It was, and once I got sober, or once I had the moment of clarity that in order for my life to improve and in order for things to improve, I had to stop drinking. The insight brought with it the power to stop drinking. It brought with it the realization that ultimate peace or ultimate satisfaction wasn't to be found in alcohol. And I guess I just saw this literally while you were speaking, Barbara. It kind of revealed a part of me that was before the desire to drink. It revealed something more essential, more elemental than um, the, the part that believes the thinking. It believed something. It revealed something that was worth taking account of, and so the moment that thought changed, then everything else just changed downstream of that. It was, for me, I really would describe it as a spiritual experience, having that moment of insight. But similar moments of insight occur all the time, and on one level it seems to me that they are spiritual experiences, but in another level they're very, very ordinary. We can have fresh thinking about something. And for me, there were other unhelpful or addictive behaviors that I have that have also, the thinking has fallen away. But it wasn't until I discovered this work, the inside out understanding, that I came to see that absolutely no substance or behavior has the power or the capability to create peace or satisfaction or any other emotion in me. That the only way those come about, the only way peace of mind and clarity and serenity come about are really when the false beliefs fall away, when I see through them. And so today, sometimes I still, I will still have the moment of thinking, oh, there would be nothing like that cake that would just be so satisfying. But it's a fleeting thought today because I know that it can't be true. I know that it can't, that nothing actually has that power. And just for that moment, I've fallen into the illusion again. But the wonderful thing about this understanding is it means that that the illusion is fleeting, and sometimes I give into it. Sometimes I have the bit of cake, I'm not, but it's a very different thing of thinking that I'm broken and compulsive, and that I'm about to enter into a binge and I won't be able to stop. It's a very, very different thing. It brings with it a kind of lightness and capacity to just be gentle and accepting of the humanness that sometimes I believe my thinking. Sometimes I believe my thinking, and it doesn't really matter because I will always wake up again, as we all do.
Yeah, I love that, Christian, that, when we can be okay with our humanness and just realize that sometimes we're going to get fooled. Like I found it really amusing this time when I sort of looked in the mirror. I was dog sitting for my brother and I was standing in front of a mirror that we don't have in our house. And I was like, oh my goodness, look at what's happened here. Now in the past, I would have beaten myself up. There would have been so much fixation on the judgment and the criticism of my behavior. And this time I could just really look right to the source. Like, look at the thinking, look at the way you unconsciously, really, because I really don't believe that any addiction can exist when we are conscious, when we are fully conscious of what's going on and aware of what's going on. But when you can really see, oh, wow, look at what you did. Now, you've been doing this your whole life. you've been off and on during different points in your life. You have done this. You have convinced yourself that you can eat in a certain way and you're not going to gain weight. And in the past, I would have focused on that with such shame and such remorse and such a sense that there was something I had to do, that I sort of had to beat myself about it. And, I had to really double down on my efforts and starve myself and, like, bad, I can't believe you did this. And I think that's where when you put the focus on the behavior, and, it's what we do often, and especially when we think that that's the answer, there's so much self-recrimination and there's so much shame. And then that sets up more and more desire for whatever it is, because you just feel terrible. And this time it was so different. I really was laughing. I mean, I was like laughing my head off, like, oh my God, yeah. I mean, what made you think? Well, you can convince yourself. That's how powerful our thinking is. You can convince yourself of just about anything. But one of the things we do with addicts, again, in putting so much, and I had a conversation with a woman a few weeks ago that was really heartbreaking to hear the amount of self-recrimination and pain and control that she had been exerting on her food issues over the course of many years. And the fear that drove that, the fear of, what would happen if she let go of the reins, or if she stepped off the mark, or if she, and without this understanding, that really, we can't learn how to trust ourselves. And anytime you start to focus on an addict's behavior, first of all, automatically defenses go up. People don't hear because they get defensive in their walls. But when you can see and you can lead them to, well, what are you thinking? Like, what? And that's what I did with myself. What was I thinking? And the reality was, I wasn't really thinking. I really didn't care to think that much about it. It tasted good. It was comfortable. It was the middle of the pandemic. I don't know what permission I gave myself, but I could just sort of see that and just kind of let it go. And, my motivation started to kick back in as, the days started getting longer, and, I started thinking about being more active, and my natural flow started to come back online, rather than, again, this sense of just doom that I had fallen prey to my thinking again, which led me down the path of the behavior. And then the consequence, which was probably having put on quite a bit of weight over the last few months. So it's just kinder and gentler. It's a much nicer way to live. And the more lightly we can wear our humanness, the much better our mental health is. And just again, hearing this woman a few weeks ago, just with the angst and the pain that she had, and had been told by a number of the people in her 12-step programs that she had to keep a rein on this. There was no trust of any system internally that might guide her, direct her towards a healthier, happier lifestyle. To me, felt so sad and tragic. And, I guess that's what I see with people now. We can just be human and be okay with that.
Yeah, yeah. There's something about, looking at behavior that seems to bring, it seems to involve so much kind of shame and judgment, and even small amounts of those emotions are, I think, disproportionately unpleasant to deal with. And it's also, they all fall into the category of things that can't be changed because they're in the past. That I did this thing and I'm ashamed, or I wish I hadn't. There's just a kind of hideous snowball effect, it seems to me. And it might even be about something quite small, but it's, in my experience, it's never helpful. And again, even before I encountered the principles, I was always I'd begun to have some insights around the whole idea of us having defects of character, and that's just something that doesn't resonate with me at all today. I think that we're, and I'm not pretending that I think that nobody ever behaves badly. I mean, far from that. But I think that's an unhelpful way to consider what's going on. And it seems to me that when we go back to look at the root cause of and get curious about that, and it doesn't mean endlessly analyzing particular thoughts that happen, but when we go back to that root cause, we can see that along with everybody else in the world, we were having thoughts, and we were believing some of them that weren't true, and big deal. And there's something about seeing that the capacity to think, and it's more than a capacity, but the function of thinking is a constant thing, and it's happening right now, and thoughts just arise from nowhere and then they disappear somewhere eventually. And for me, looking at that part, looking at the fact that we do think, and it's a creative process, and it's an aspect of our essence, is an aspect of our creative self. It's energizing. It's non-judgmental, and it's hopeful. That there's something about that that's has a very different energy to it, a very different feeling to it than the kind of ruminating over everything I got wrong and the consequences thereof.
Yeah, I think it's just a much easier, lighter way to live your life when you can wear it lightly. And again, I think one of the things I really have seen with this understanding is that when we are in our mental health, when we really don't take these things so seriously, and we aren't walking around sort of with our hands at our jugular vein all the time, trying to control behaviors and trying to fit some sort of idea of what's acceptable or what's okay or what's good. There's a lot more laughter. There's a lot more amusement. There's a lot more ease and comfort. And personally, I would much rather live that way. And again, focusing on the behaviors is just really it's the tail wagging the dog, only it's kind of the tip of the tail trying to wag the dog. And you're never going to really understand that, the whole pathway of what makes the tail wag until you get to the heart of how it works. And once you see that, it's a completely different experience.
Yeah. And that awareness alone is the thing that will change change behaviors over the trajectory of a lifetime. But that awareness is the starting point.
Absolutely. I once had a client who said to me she was in a class of I don't know, spiritual psychotherapy or something like that, and the professor came in and wrote on the blackboard, "Awareness cures." And he said, if you know this, we don't have to go any further. So everybody's like, oh yeah, we know that. And he said, fine. And he left the room. First class. But that's true. Awareness cures. And when you know, and when you are aware of what is driving this system that creates the end tail of the dog, of the behaviors, that's a game changer. The jig is up.
Yeah. I can't believe how quickly this part goes, Barbara.
I know.
Do you have more to say, or shall we
No,
open
I'm
it
all
up to
set.
the?
Let's open
Okay.
it up.